When you find yourself resorting to drastic measures, doubt tends to stick around. I couldn't help but wonder what I might have done differently to avoid ending up where I am now. Were there steps I could have taken to sidestep this mess? I was pretty sure my options were limited. It's tough to get an adult to see how their actions could wreck everything they care about. You can't force them to understand. All you can do is stand by helplessly, watching the fallout and trying to deal with it. That's exactly where I was. My wife, who I once thought was loving, insisted that this whole thing would somehow make us stronger, like it was a testament to the depth and significance of our love. But to me, it just showed how shallow her love really was, highlighting her selfishness and self-indulgence. I'm just an ordinary guy living a simple life. I'm not some rugged, sensitive, romantic hero. Like everyone else, I've got my flaws. Sometimes I get too wrapped up in myself, I work too much, and I can be a bit short-tempered without meaning to be. It's not intentional, it just happens. I'm only human. Life's like that. Work and everyday events can throw things off balance. Jessica and I had been married for 19 years. We had our intimate moments a couple of times a week, and it was always enjoyable. When time allowed, we were both eager for more. Of course, hobbies like football, a good book, or a TV show, along with the demands of parenting, could sometimes divert our focus. But we made it a point to connect when it mattered, or when the mood struck. Our marriage was on a steady course. Financially, we were doing better, and our daughters, Samantha and Chloe, aged 16 and 14, brought so much joy into our lives. While I might have seen myself as just an average guy, they were truly exceptional. Life was good, until my wife started entertaining some unconventional ideas. She began labeling our intimate life as plain vanilla and insisted we needed to spice things up. Even though I was content, I agreed to go along with it. At first, it was about trying out different positions, which was fun for me since I'm still in pretty good shape. But after a while, the novelty wore off. Then came the role-playing phase, and I had no idea where that idea came from. Maybe from her girlfriends, some women's magazine, or a misguided TV show. It was fun for about 3 tries, but then it just seemed impractical. Trying to keep my focus on an attractive woman while pretending to be Leonardo DiCaprio, or remembering she was supposed to be Scarlett Johansson was too much. I decided I didn't want to continue, and that's when she started to express her dissatisfaction. She asked me when was the last time I went on a date. I reminded her that just last Friday, I took her to that Italian restaurant she wanted to try, and then we went to the movies while her mom watched the girls overnight. She clarified that she didn't mean with her. She wanted to know when I last went out with someone else. I wondered if she was accusing me of something, but she quickly reassured me she wasn't. She asked if I remembered the name of the last girl I dated before her. I said I did. It was Lisa, just a couple of weeks after we met, and we had a big argument over that date. She asked if I ever missed it, and I laughed, saying, "God, no." I remembered how awful the whole dating scene was. Not that particular date, which was fine, but the nerve-wracking process of asking a girl out, the fear of rejection, and those awkward first conversations. It was terrifying, honestly. Then she asked me what this was all about. I explained that I was just wondering if she ever felt like going on a date with someone else. She assured me she had never felt that way. She reminded me how upset she was when I went out with Lisa, and how she told me she wanted us to be exclusive. I agreed, saying I wanted the same thing, and that if I felt differently, I wouldn't have asked her to marry me. I told her that being married means not going on dates with anyone other than your spouse. She dropped the subject, and for a month I didn't hear anything more about it. Then, on a Friday night, after we had just finished making love without any role-playing or gimmicks, just the two of us enjoying each other, she brought something up that killed the mood. Jessica mentioned how Harper, a friend from her workplace, had been looking at me tonight and suggested she wanted me to ask her to dance. I told Jessica that while it was flattering, I only wanted to dance with her. Jessica said she told Harper she wouldn't be jealous if I asked her. I replied that it was nice of her, but made it clear that I had no interest in dancing with Harper. Jessica then asked if I'd be jealous if she danced with another man. I tried to lighten the mood by joking that her brother would be okay, but she didn't find it funny. She clarified that she never cared if I danced with guys who asked nicely and kept their hands where they belonged. She asked if there was anyone at the event I wanted to dance with. I told her I didn't remember anyone asking me, and she accepted that, saying she was just curious. I had no idea where this was going, but it made me uneasy. Feeling like I wouldn't be able to sleep, I got up and headed to the den to play a video game. She stood at the doorway, watching me for a moment, but I didn't look at her. Eventually, she returned to bed, and I joined her later, once she was asleep. For the next 2 months, everything was calm until Rachel's promotion party at the Johnson Rhino, which had a fantastic band playing that night. We gathered around a large circular booth, and Jessica was engrossed in a conversation with Harper James. Jessica suggested that Harper wanted to dance and asked if I could be a gentleman and oblige. Remembering our conversation from months ago, I felt awkward. While I valued Harper as a friend and didn't want to upset her, dancing with her was not something I was comfortable with. The idea of being close to her made me uneasy, but I wasn't sure how to decline without causing a scene. Though I enjoyed dancing, I wasn't as confident in my skills, especially compared to Harper, who moved with the grace of a panther. Feeling trapped, I stood up, commenting that they were playing our song. Harper joined me, her brown thighs on display beneath her short blue dress. As the song ended, the band began a slow tune, and I couldn't help but wonder why it had to be now. Harper fit against me perfectly, her chest pressing into mine, and her dark curls nearly covered my face. She smelled wonderful, and when she looked up at me, her big brown eyes were like deep pools, and her smile flashed Johnson against her tan skin. She wasn't very dark-skinned, more like a light coffee color. After the dance, Harper thanked me, saying Jessica had assured her I wouldn't mind dancing. I complimented her dancing, but admitted that I did mind, explaining that although I liked her and thought she was the sweetest girl I knew, dancing with her wasn't the best idea for me. She laughed and said I was safe with her, teasing that if I weren't married, she'd be all over me. But she stressed the importance of our friendship and suggested we enjoy the one dance. I gave her a little squeeze, and we finished the song. Back at the booth, Jessica was gone. Scanning the room, I spotted her black and Johnson dress. She was on the floor with some young, Nordic-looking guy, laughing up at him while his hands wandered too low. She caught me watching, smiled, and waved. I was livid, absolutely furious. I realized she'd set me up with Harper so she could dance with that clown. I threw some cash on the table and headed for the exit. Harper watched me get halfway to the door before running after me. I stopped, and slightly out of breath, she asked where I was going. I told her we were being played. Jessica had been going on about dating other people and asking if I'd thought about it. This was a setup. She got me to dance with Harper, to give her an excuse to dance with Mr. Perfect inside. Harper asked if I planned to just leave Jessica there. I said yes. She grabbed my arm, looking guilty, and apologized. I reassured her, saying I disliked being manipulated as much as she did. She asked if I could take her back to my house to get her car. As we neared home, my phone buzzed, but I ignored it. Harper glanced over when her phone rang, and she answered it. She told Jessica we were almost at my place, explaining it wasn't her idea. She had come with us and wasn't about to be stranded. Harper warned Jessica not to put her in that position and hung up. She then told me Jessica wanted me to go back and get her. I vented my frustration, wishing for a wife who didn't play these childish games, and sighed, wondering how we ended up here. Harper explained it was Karen from work, who had been raving about having an open marriage, claiming it made their love life better. Karen and her husband Frank barely talked and spent their time trying to involve their friends in their lifestyle. Jessica bought into it, and Harper thought she was trying to rope me into the whole thing. I was shocked when Harper mentioned Jessica knew she had feelings for me and had always been attracted to me. I nearly choked and apologized for the awkward situation. Harper said she found me attractive, but stressed that I was a one-woman kind of guy, not someone who shared. She reassured me, questioning why she should be sorry since Jessica's actions had nothing to do with her. She said she had the chance to dance with her dream guy and felt no regret about it. I promised to keep her updated, and she drove off. Once inside the house, I paused to gather my thoughts, then moved my belongings from the master bathroom to the guest room. I also relocated my work items there. Locking the door, I went to sleep, aided by the drinks I had consumed. I was awakened partially by the sound of a door slamming downstairs and footsteps echoing down the hallway. The doorknob twisted a few times, followed by a gentle knock. I heard Jessica's voice, trying not to wake the girls, asking what was going on. The knocking and whispering went on for about 10 minutes, before her footsteps retreated to what used to be our bedroom. I found myself disliking the bed in the guest room. I had planned to slip out before she woke up, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. As I packed my briefcase with files, she came downstairs, clearly upset, and asked me what was wrong with me. I shot back that maybe she should be asking herself that question. Her voice grew louder as she demanded to know what I meant by that. I picked up my briefcase and told her that everything I was doing was in response to her actions. I didn't want to see her at that moment, and warned her she was getting dangerously close to making me angry for good. I instructed her to get her act together, check off all her points, and be ready to discuss it when I got home. I also mentioned that I'd pick up the girls and take them to my mom's house to sort things out. She went pale and insisted she had no idea what I was talking about, hinting that she might have plans for the night. I told her it was up to her, and that if she wanted to fix what was broken, she should be ready and stop making excuses. I added that if she was fine with the way things were, she could do whatever she wanted. I finished by telling her to move her stuff into the spare bedroom because I liked my bed, making it clear she wasn't welcome in it. She puffed up, but I left her there and headed to work. I picked up the girls from school, and they were happy to spend the evening at Grandma's. I explained to Mom that Jessica and I were having some issues and needed some time alone. She gave me a hug and said she loved me. I was relieved not to have to answer a lot of questions. When I got home, Jessica was there. She'd made cookies, and there was a plate of them and a cup of coffee waiting for me. She stood up, clung to me for a moment, kissed my cheek, and sat beside me on the sofa. I helped myself to a cookie, oatmeal with chocolate chips and M&Ms. It felt like we were off to a good start, and I hated to spoil the pleasantness. I told Jessica that what she did the previous night was unacceptable. I emphasized that her actions were not only hurtful to me, but also embarrassing for both of us, and disrespectful to Harper, who was supposed to be her friend. Jessica struggled to meet my eyes and apologized. Reflecting on my own behavior, I realized I shouldn't have handled things the way I did. My intention was to open up a dialogue with her because she'd shut me down repeatedly before. I hoped this would encourage her to consider different perspectives. When I asked her what possibilities she had in mind, Jessica hesitated before blurting out that she'd been thinking about dating other people. In response, I pointed out several problems with that idea, starting with the fact that we were both married. She countered that other married people did it, citing open marriages as a way to strengthen love. Skeptical, I asked where she got that idea from and demanded a name. She mentioned Karen and Frank, claiming they had an open marriage that improved their relationship. I doubted her information and suggested we verify it on Google. She seemed surprised, but agreed to sit beside me as I opened my laptop. After typing in, "How many people have open marriages?" and clicking on the first link, we found out that, according to a survey, less than 1% of Americans have open marriages. Checking several other links confirmed the same result, less than 1%. She seemed to have expected a different outcome and commented that it was still a significant number, estimating at least 3 million. I disagreed, doubting that many children were in marriages, open or otherwise. Suggesting another approach, I proposed typing in, "How many Americans expect their partners to be faithful?" After clicking the link, we found that over 95% of Americans expect fidelity. I pondered aloud, asking what she thought that meant. She speculated that most people weren't very open-minded, saying she thought there'd be more people with alternative lifestyles because she heard about it all the time. She wondered how many of those open marriages ended in divorce. Despite her reluctance, I insisted, and I wanted her to know. I then typed in, "How many open marriages end in divorce?" The answer revealed that 92% of open marriages end in divorce within 5 years. I analyzed the statistics, saying, "Okay, let's see. Less than 1% of Americans are in an open marriage. That means out of 1 million people, fewer than 10,000 are in open marriages. 92% of open marriages end in divorce. That leaves 800 out of 10,000 that don't end in divorce within 5 years. That's 800 out of 1 million. I asked Jessica to do the math and consider the odds of success for open marriages, especially when 92% of 1% fail. She admitted that the chances weren't good. I pointed out that the few successful ones were those where both parties were willing participants. I directed her to the screen, emphasizing that 100% of marriages where one party is coerced into it fail. I made it clear that our situation would fall into that category since I wasn't willing to participate. I explained how feelings of resentment, competitiveness, jealousy, insecurity, betrayal, and lack of security would affect us if I allowed this. I expressed that the only reason I would endure such absurdity would be if I were desperate to keep her, but I reassured her that I wasn't that desperate. I mentioned that other women found me attractive, bringing up an encounter from the previous night as proof. I told her that if I were a pathetic loser or some kind of sick individual, I might be interested in playing her game, but I wasn't that kind of man. I made it clear that I'd rather she shoot me in the head than break my heart. Jessica weakly countered that not everything on the internet could be trusted. I agreed, saying a lot of it was probably misinformation, especially the part about many people having open marriages, which I suggested she should take with a grain of salt. I questioned her trust in Karen, asking if she believed everything Karen told her and pointing out Karen's history of multiple divorces. When Jessica didn't seem to know about Karen's husband, I pressed further and found out Karen had been divorced 4 times. I couldn't believe Jessica was taking marriage advice from someone who had failed so many times. She protested, saying that Karen and Frank had a strong marriage. Frustrated, I asked Jessica where she got all this information. She admitted Karen talked about it constantly, and I learned Karen and Frank barely spoke to each other, spending their time trying to engage their friends in their lifestyle. I was fed up and asked Jessica what she thought would come of all this. When she said our sex life had become stale, I disagreed, insisting I was perfectly happy. I pointed out how her desire to play these games had made everything weird, referencing the last time and how she'd climaxed half a dozen times. I asked if those were Karen's ideas, and her expression confirmed it. I reacted strongly, expressing disbelief and frustration, emphasizing the strength of our marriage, and rejecting the idea entirely. She argued it could be good and exciting, suggesting we share experiences. I called it a nightmare and challenged her claim about men's fantasies, telling her to Google it. I made it clear that any involvement in such matters would mean the end of our relationship. Jessica looked shocked and asked what I meant by "we're through." She wondered if it meant divorce and expressed disappointment, saying she thought our marriage meant more. I echoed her disappointment, expressing doubt about the strength of our marriage based on her discussions about such matters. I told her that talking about these things made me question whether our marriage held any significance for her. I asked what she would tell our daughters about mom and dad potentially splitting up. She suggested it would be because I couldn't accept her having other relationships. But I countered, saying the truth would be that their mother didn't love their father enough to keep her marriage vows and provide a loving home. I accused her of putting her desires above our family's well-being. As our argument intensified, she insisted this was going to happen and that it was inevitable. I refused to accept it, warning her of the consequences. I told her she was mistaken and emphasized that our marriage wouldn't survive her involvement with someone else. I said I'd consult a lawyer the moment she went through with it. I presented her with options: forget everything for a quick divorce, or schedule therapy sessions to understand her irrational behavior. I expressed skepticism about counseling's success, labeling her actions a major mistake that would make everyone miserable. I blamed her misguided ideas on Karen's influence and warned that positive outcomes were unlikely. I made it clear that I wouldn't stand by idly and emphasized the potential suffering for everyone involved. I challenged her plans and actions. She taunted me, insisting on her freedom, and claimed I couldn't stop her. She argued I wouldn't divorce her out of fear of losing too much and threatened to take the girls in the house, leaving me with alimony and child support. In response, I urged her to think about the situation and not do anything foolish. Despite her claims of love, I resisted her proposal, emphasizing that the excitement she suggested would only lead to risks and downsides. I stood firm, expressing the gravity of the situation, and rejected her plea to give it a try. She stood up, approached my chair, and tried to embrace and kiss me. I pushed her hands away, stood up, and told her not to touch me. I said I needed time to think about this, and that I'd let her know what I decided. That was a lie. I didn't need time to contemplate. I needed to organize my strategy. She was probably right about the complexities of divorcing her. The whole system is messed up, and I needed to make some moves. I left her and went to the master bedroom, locking the door behind me. After spending 30 minutes on the computer and 10 on the phone, I had a financial plan. The problem was the girls. Under Georgia law, where we lived in Atlanta, children over 14 get to choose their custodial parent. I was confident about Chloe. My little princess was Daddy's girl. Samantha loved me, but she also held her mother in high regard. I was confident that Chloe would choose to stay with me, and I hoped Samantha wouldn't want to be separated from her sister. I figured if they understood Jessica's plan to use them as leverage for her open marriage idea, they'd want nothing to do with her. It was a cynical approach, and I hated every part of it, but she was the one trying to change the rules. If Jessica had told me before we got married that she planned to be faithful for 19 years and then explore other relationships, I would have walked away immediately. She knew it, and she would have done the same. Now she was trying to change the rules and force me to comply, using manipulation as her tactic. 2 nights later, we had the dreaded conversation. Jessica started with an apology, but I wasn't in the mood to accept it. I asked her if she had thought about seeing a therapist or trying marriage counseling. She dismissed the idea, saying she didn't have any problems, and accusing me of being the one planning to be with other people. I pointed out the contradiction, and she claimed she wasn't planning anything specific, just wanted the option to be there if the opportunity came up. I shared my perspective, telling her I had chances to cheat over the years, but never did because I was committed to our marriage. I emphasized the importance of planning for a successful marriage and criticized her for lacking that commitment. I was worried about breaking the promises we'd made to each other, our children, and even God. Despite her defensive response, I asked how the girls would feel about her betrayal, telling her she wouldn't be the one to explain it to them. Later that day, Jessica threatened that as their mother, she'd get custody of the kids and make sure I'd never see them again. She vowed to make visitations difficult and warned me not to say a word to them. After a heated argument, she glared at me, stormed off, and made enough noise for anyone on the stairs to hear a couple of faint gasps and a muffled sob. When I reached the stairs, the girls were gone. I went to Chloe's room and then to Samantha's, where I heard quiet voices inside. I knocked, and Samantha asked what I wanted. I asked to come in, and when she opened the door, it was clear they'd both been crying. Sitting between them, I hugged them and apologized for the scene they had witnessed. I explained that I thought they wouldn't believe me unless they heard the conversation themselves. Samantha reassured me, saying it wasn't my fault and placing the blame on her mom. She admitted she didn't believe me at first, but understood now. Chloe expressed disbelief at her mom's actions, asking how she could do this to us. I admitted I didn't know what was driving Jessica, explaining she'd been influenced by negative people at work and had made up her mind. I shared my failed attempts to change her mind and her lack of concern for the consequences. Chloe asked if Jessica was sick, and I said I had no idea what was going on with her. I mentioned I had suggested therapy and counseling, but Jessica wasn't interested. Chloe asked what they should do, and I told them to do nothing for now. I explained that I planned to wait until Jessica thought I had given up, then be ready to leave when she went on a date. I doubted she'd listen, even if I tried to talk her out of it. I asked if they were with me on this, or if they wanted to stay with their mom. Chloe looked at Samantha before saying, "No, Dad, we're going with you." My heart lifted, knowing my kids supported me after 19 years of disappointment. For the next 2 months, Jessica and I barely spoke, becoming strangers living in the same house. The guest room became her space while I stayed in what had once been ours. Despite my efforts to talk to her and change her mind, our interactions were tense. One evening as we worked in the garden, I brought up the subject again. I asked if her plan was working, if our marriage was stronger, and if the situation was as exciting as she'd hoped. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes before anger took over. She snapped that everything was my fault. I told her I didn't want a wife who planned to be with other people. She insisted I was the one to blame. In our heated exchange, she shouted that I needed to see the positives in the situation. She claimed everything could be perfect if I let go of my pride. I questioned what she meant by perfect and who it would be perfect for. From where I stood, the situation was anything but perfect, and certainly not in my favor. I challenged Jessica's claim that she loved me more by emphasizing that real love is shown through freedom and commitment, which I had given her while staying true to our vows. I saw her desire to explore and push boundaries as selfishness, not love. I made it clear that my love for her was demonstrated by not seeking out other relationships, and if she truly loved me, she would do the same. I asked her when she stopped loving me, and through tears she denied it, insisting that her love had only grown stronger. I questioned her understanding of love, suggesting that her actions felt like driving a stake through my heart. She became furious and announced her plan to go to a club with a colleague, Tom Johnson, on Friday night, insisting I come along, promising it would be exciting. Reluctantly, I agreed, thinking that if she was determined to go through with it, I might as well see it firsthand. As she rushed across the garden, she hugged me tightly, thanking me for agreeing to participate. Despite her gratitude, I was filled with regret and found the situation unbearable. Considering my options, I decided to call Harper, hoping for her support. When I explained the plan, Harper was furious. She hadn't realized that Jessica had set her up to be with me while she went clubbing with Tom Johnson. Upon hearing the plan, she vowed to confront Jessica. I asked Harper to trust me, explaining that I needed her help because I was planning to leave Jessica. Initially skeptical, Harper questioned my sincerity, wondering if it was a plot to get her into my house. Amused, I admitted that it was indeed a plan to have her help move the girls to my new place while I retrieved our belongings. Surprisingly, she found the vengeful aspect appealing and agreed to help. Throughout the week leading up to Friday, Jessica was unusually affectionate, as if making up for lost time. On Friday morning, before heading to work, I asked her one last time if she was sure about going through with the plan, reminding her of the enjoyable week we'd spent together. She was resolute, assuring me we could discuss everything afterward if needed. She expressed gratitude for my willingness to go along and promised the upcoming night would be unforgettable. She danced out of the bedroom, convinced I'd love it. Yeah, right, I thought sourly. Let's just get through this day. When Harper arrived that Friday evening, she looked absolutely stunning. Jessica, petite and cute with a teenager's face, couldn't compare. Harper was tall, with curves that were impossible to ignore. She wore a short, tight red dress adorned with sequins, looking every bit like a movie star. I was dressed in a sport coat, black pants, and a ribbed t-shirt. As she entered, she playfully teased me about my attire, suggesting I was trying to seduce her. I assured her it was strictly business that night, saving any such intentions for another time. She expressed disappointment, mentioning she wore a thong because she thought I'd like it. Playfully, I asked to see it. I pulled her close, my hands on the hem of her dress, teasingly lifting it up her legs. She warned me that Jessica might walk in at any moment, but I insisted, saying Jessica needed to think I was playing along. We shared a laugh as I continued the playful charade. Just as I was about to appreciate the view, Jessica entered the room unexpectedly. There was a moment of surprise, and Harper quickly adjusted her dress. Jessica greeted us with a smile, commenting on our apparent early start. I suggested she and Tom should be the ones getting a room. Jessica smirked, grabbed her clutch, and we headed out for the night. Tom met us at the club, and I don't think the evening started as he expected. I shook his hand and crushed it. Years of powerlifting had given me quite a grip. I watched him go weak at the knees, then let him go. You could tell he wanted to nurse his hand, but his macho image wouldn't allow it. Tom was one of those pretty boys. Have you ever noticed that as men approach what some women consider ideal, they're often hairdressers or Scientologists? Watching Tom, I couldn't help but draw a parallel with Tom Cruise. Curious, I asked if he was a hairdresser. He laughed, dismissing the idea, saying most hairdressers were gay. I acknowledged this and mentioned L. Ron Hubbard, revealing I'd been involved with Scientology for 6 years while testing a theory. Harper, who had heard my theory before, was on the verge of choking and seemed ready to burst into laughter. Noticing Jessica's face flushed with anger, I realized I might have revealed a bit too much of my private theories to Harper. To change the subject, Harper suggested we find a booth, striding away with a tense posture, with Mr. Tom trailing behind her at a cautious distance. Once Tom was out of earshot, Harper burst into laughter, and I couldn't help but join her. "You're a mean man, James," she said with a grin. "Yeah, well, this is one hell of a night," I replied. I encouraged her to act as though she was seducing me, and she played the part convincingly. By the time we reached the booth, I felt thoroughly seduced. After dancing with her twice, Harper made it seem like she was ready to engage in something much more intimate right there on the dance floor. When we returned to the booth, Jessica was wrapped up with Mr. Tom. I turned to Harper and asked, "Are you ready for the big show?" She looked up at me with those radiant brown eyes, and I realized this wasn't just a game for her. Her full lips parted slightly, and her petite tongue moistened them. I couldn't resist and leaned in to kiss her. It was everything I hoped it would be and more. Suddenly I heard a noise, and Jessica and Mr. Tom slid back into the booth. "Oh no!" I exclaimed, using my best Saturday Night Live impression. "Look who's back!" Harper caught on and so did Jessica, but Mr. Tom remained clueless. Harper chuckled and told me not to be too mean to him. Jessica's face puffed up like a pufferfish, and her smug smile vanished. I informed them that Harper and I were planning to leave and told them to have fun. Jessica walked us to the door and asked if I was okay, noting that I'd been acting like an idiot earlier. I told her I wasn't okay and urged her to come home with me so we could try to work things out. I warned her that staying would be a permanent decision. She insisted this was going to be great for us, told me to enjoy myself, and encouraged me not to be stupid. I retorted, hinting that her interest lay with Mr. Tom, not me, and said Harper and I were leaving. She grabbed my arm and insisted it would be a great experience, pointing out that Harper was interested in me. I asked if she was spending the night with Tom, teasing her about his stamina. She hesitated, but said she might get home around midnight after spicing things up with Mr. Tom. I rolled my eyes, remembering their plans, and told her to be quiet if Harper and I were still busy when she got back. She kissed me, and I hoped she enjoyed it, knowing it would be the last one. I left and got into the car where Harper was waiting. She asked if I was sure about my decision, given my long marriage. I sighed and said I was. She commented on how calm I seemed and was surprised by my lack of distress. I explained that I'd run out of emotional energy after being upset for so long. I was just tired and wanted the ordeal to end. I told her I'd shed enough tears already, and now it was time to move on. I suggested we go get the girls. When we arrived, we found the moving truck already being loaded. The girls were busy carrying their clothes downstairs and packing them into large plastic tubs. We were only taking essential items: the master bedroom bed, the girls' beds, their TVs and electronics, and the big screen TV we'd replaced 6 months ago with an even larger one. Once the girls finished packing, Harper took them in her car and drove to our new place, which was as far from the old one as we could get, while staying in the same school district. The movers finished packing, and I took one last look around the house. It felt empty and silent, with only the ghosts of 19 years lingering. With a sigh, I removed my wedding ring and placed it on the kitchen table next to my cell phone. The girls' phones were already there, signaling it was time to leave. A sense of melancholy washed over me. I was leaving with a whimper, having thrown a few petty jabs at Jessica and Mr. Tom, and walking away from 19 years that in truth had been pretty good. But life moves on. I locked up, loaded my tools from the garage into the back of my truck, and left. The girls were excited about the new place, especially the backyard pool. They couldn't wait to try it out the next day. "Do you like it, baby?" I asked Chloe. "She yeeted," she said. I had no idea what yeet meant, but it sounded positive. Harper was there, still looking amazing. Even if she had been Jennifer Lawrence in the flesh, I was just too tired. Not that I'd prefer Jennifer Lawrence to Harper, but you know what I mean. I think she sensed that and gave me a dazzling smile, a quick peck on the cheek, and then she was gone. The lingering scent of her perfume was the only reminder she'd been there. We went to bed, and surprisingly, while I didn't sleep well, I did manage to get some rest. The next morning, I got up, made coffee, and the girls joined me after a while. We had Danish Kringle and chocolate milk for breakfast, and the girls watched cartoons on TV until noon. By the afternoon, 2 energetic little bundles in bikinis were splashing around in the pool while I lounged nearby, pretending to keep an eye on them, but really lost in thought about Mandy. By now, she was probably in a panic, calling everyone she knew, trying to piece together what happened. She'd have a tough time tracking us down. I wasn't working, having sold the business for a tidy sum, and the girls weren't in school since it was summer break. We weren't going anywhere except the grocery store, and we either walked or took the bus there. The truck stayed hidden in the garage. I was sure she had the police looking for us, but not having a car made things harder for them. The only way she could reach us was electronically. Our inboxes were flooded with her messages, and she immediately pinged the girls whenever they logged onto social media, sending tweets and Instagram messages too. We read them, but didn't respond. Let her find us the hard way. I figured she'd eventually have to look for me, especially since she had work and Tom's to pay. I wasn't making any payments, and she would quickly fall behind. We had significant equity in the house, and losing it wouldn't be something she'd want. About 3 weeks later, a private detective approached me at the grocery store. He asked if I was who he thought I was, and I said yes, knowing my wife had hired him to find me. He told me he planned to inform her of my whereabouts and suggested I give her a call. He also warned me that I could be charged with stalking if he saw me around. I laughed him off and told him to buzz off, with no intention of contacting her. It turned out I didn't need to. The police showed up soon after with Jessica feeding them a line that I had kidnapped the girls. They asked me to come down to the station to sort it out. When I refused, they arrested me and took me downtown. The girls were taken in another car, and when we got to the station, Jessica was there. She tried to hug the girls, but they pushed her away. A woman escorted them into one room with Jessica while I was taken to another. The cops started questioning me aggressively, but I simply handed over my ID, reminding them they already had my driver's license. The only words I said were that I intended to remain silent and wanted to speak to an attorney. That shut them up quickly, and I overheard one saying I was lawyering up. They handed me a phone, and I called Michael Reed, who arrived in 45 minutes as planned. It took about 3 hours to resolve everything. The girls confirmed they were with me willingly and denied any kidnapping. They also refused to talk to their mother. Michael took over, pointing out there was no court order regarding custody, and that under Georgia law, both parents were considered equal candidates for custody. He also highlighted that children over 14 could choose whom they wanted to live with. In the end, they had to let us go. Harper was there to walk out with us, with Jessica trailing behind, pleading with the girls to talk to her. They got into Harper's car and drove away, leaving us alone in the parking lot. Jessica was a wreck, crying her eyes out, and she fell to her knees in front of me. I reminded her that I had begged her not to mess around with Mr. Tom and pointed out that she hadn't listened, so why should I? She continued pleading, asking me not to treat her like this and expressing sorrow. I agreed to talk and asked where she wanted to go. She begged to go home, not wanting anyone to see her like this. I suggested going to my place instead since I had no interest in going to hers and didn't know who she'd had over there. She let out a little wail of dismay but nodded, agreeing to go to my place. "Okay, James, whatever you want," she said, adding, "but it's your home too." I didn't argue with her. She suggested I ride with her, but I declined and called a cab instead. She followed me home. Knowing the girls were with Harper and staying the night, I invited Jessica in and made her a cup of coffee. We sat at the bar, and an uncomfortable silence hung between us. Silence hadn't been awkward since our third date, but it sure was now. After a while, she asked what I wanted, and I countered by asking if I had mentioned wanting anything. She clarified, asking what she needed to do to get me to come home and see the girls. I told her I had no control over her seeing the girls. It was their choice. She accused me of turning the girls against her and suggested Karen might have told me everything. I asked if Karen was the oracle of all wisdom. She repeated her question, asking what I wanted. I noted that, interestingly, I hadn't said a word to the girls about her. The only thing I told them was that I was leaving, and they needed to decide whom they wanted to live with. When she pressed on, wondering who had told them, I revealed that she was the one who had told them. Confused, she asked when she would have said anything. I reminded her of the night in the living room when she threatened me and pointed out that the girls were sitting on the stairs, overhearing every word she said. Her face turned ashen, and tears streamed down her cheeks as she broke down completely. I told her that the girls believed she had twisted their perception, and honestly, I felt the same way. Her begging was heart-wrenching, but I was too hurt to care. I told her coldly that the situation with the girls was her mess to fix, not mine. When she asked how she could make things right with me, I suggested she file for divorce. She pleaded that she didn't want a divorce. She just wanted me to come back home. I told her that I already had a home, and it wasn't with her. She apologized, admitting it was a mistake to try and force her choices on me, and expressed deep regret. She asked for forgiveness and suggested we try marriage counseling or therapy. I explained that the issue wasn't about what I wanted, but what she had chosen. I told her to file for divorce and warned that if she didn't do it soon, I would. I made it clear that I couldn't see a future with her and that our relationship was beyond repair. Frustrated, she accused me of being a fool and claimed I had taken all our money by selling the business and draining our accounts. I defended myself, saying I sold the business at a loss and only took what I had earned. I told her that I didn't have any of that money left. It was true enough. I had hidden the funds in an offshore account, understanding the importance of protecting them before the divorce process started. The records indicated I sold the business to a Danish company for less than the taxes owed. I had overpaid the IRS, holding the surplus to offset future taxes. I left our brokerage accounts untouched, knowing I'd have to split them. To ensure the girls' financial security, I set up a trust for them to guarantee they'd be fine for the next few months. I had also been quietly collecting cash from various grocery stores and convenience stores around town. Each time I used my debit card, I requested small amounts of cash back, slowly building up a reserve. This method was legitimate and allowed me to amass a decent sum, which I stored in an old chest in a storage unit, ready for when it was needed. I informed Jessica that she could keep the house. The equity was enough for her to sell it, pay off the mortgage, and have some money left over. I sarcastically suggested she might move in with Mr. Tom, and mused about how his wife might feel about that. Jessica gasped, claiming she didn't know Tom was married. I pointed out that her willingness to pursue an open marriage meant she hadn't cared about his marital status. I told her to move on and file for divorce. As I stood up to leave, Jessica followed, visibly distressed, wringing her hands and crying. She stopped at the door, looked up at me, and begged me to tell the girls she loved them and was sorry. I agreed to pass on the message, but made it clear that I wasn't going to give up on the girls. I explained that I wasn't the one filing for divorce, because I didn't want it. What I wanted was for her to come back home. She shook her head, accusing me of being closed-minded and lamenting that she hadn't anticipated things going this way. Despite everything, she continued to profess her love for me and vowed to keep trying to make things right. I was too worn out to argue anymore, so I saw her to the door, took a moment to compose myself, and called Harper. She brought the girls back but didn't come in. Chloe and Samantha were still upset and angrier with their mother than ever. I knew they wouldn't want to hear Jessica's message, so I decided to hold off. 2 days later, Jessica showed up around 4:30 with dinner. She'd made chicken tetrazzini with French-cut green beans and a big basket of garlic bread. When Samantha opened the door, Jessica tried to hug her, but was met with a cold shoulder. Jessica greeted me, calling me baby, but Samantha quickly called for my attention. I could hear Jessica apologizing, saying she loved and missed me, but Samantha cut her off, telling her to stay away. Jessica nearly collapsed from the rejection, but I managed to catch the basket of food. I helped her to the sofa, where she buried her face in her hands, crying about how much she was hated. I acknowledged that what she did to the girls was deeply hurtful, and doubted they would easily trust her again. While I understood her pain, I emphasized that rebuilding her relationship with the girls was her responsibility alone. She looked at me, pleadingly mentioning the dinner she'd brought. Despite knowing she was reaping what she sowed, I agreed to help. I offered to talk to the girls while she set the table. Upstairs, the girls were furious, incredulous that Jessica thought bringing dinner would fix everything. Chloe was especially angry, accusing Jessica of tearing their family apart. I empathized with them, explaining that Jessica had made a mess, and now she had to face the consequences. Despite Jessica's misguided view that I was the problem, I reassured the girls that my love for them was unchanged. I told them they could choose whether to stay with me or their mother, and that I would always love them. Samantha expressed her strong aversion to eating with Jessica, saying she'd rather do anything else. The girls reaffirmed their decision to stay with me, and we shared a hug. I asked if they would be willing to come down for dinner and try to be civil. Samantha asked if that was what I wanted, and I said it was, as long as they avoided harsh comments. They agreed to be polite but wanted to express their feelings. Dinner was incredibly awkward. Jessica tried to engage them in conversation, but they only gave short answers. After the meal, we cleaned up, packed Jessica's dishes, and she prepared to leave. When Jessica asked Chloe for a hug, Chloe refused, saying Jessica wasn't her mother anymore. Both girls went to their rooms without another word. Jessica was devastated, and it took her about 30 minutes to pull herself together before leaving. Despite feeling sorry for her, I knew the situation wasn't my fault. There was a part of me that found a twisted satisfaction in how things had turned out. Jessica kept visiting about once a week, but the girls continued to push her away. She didn't file for divorce and kept trying to convince me to come back. After 6 months, I finally filed. Once the divorce was finalized, Jessica seemed to realize it was truly over. The court granted her visitation rights, but every time she tried to arrange a visit, something always seemed to get in the way. I hoped she'd find someone who fit her new lifestyle. As for me, I remained single, focusing all my attention on raising my daughters.